Hello friends, this video on our environment part 11 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. So let us now talk about solid waste disposal. So this is another threatening problem to our environment. So what do we mean by solid waste? So you can see in this picture, I have shown some waste products. Right? So when I talk of these waste products which are solid, then we call them as solid wastes. That is, these are nothing but everyday items discarded by public. For example, in our home, you would have seen that inside your house, inside each room, in fact, you have a small dustbin. Why do you have that dustbin? What is its purpose? To throw away things which you do not need anymore. For example, waste papers which you don't need, you just throw them in the dustbin. There are so many waste materials which are thrown up in the kitchen. For example, when the vegetables are cut, when you peel the vegetables, so the skin of the vegetables or the skin of the fruits, they are thrown into the dustbin. Similarly, when you open the milk packet, the packet goes into the dustbin. So sometimes there are some use and throw bottles or use and throw pens. So as soon as the refill is over, you do not have an option to change the refill. So you'll throw off your pen. So there are so many such items which we throw off when it is no more of our use. So such items together constitute the solid waste. Now from our home itself, you would have seen that every day there is so much of solid waste which actually comes out, which maybe our maid takes it away from our home, or we throw it outside somewhere where we have a public dustbin or something like that. So from each home we get so much of solid waste. So just imagine how much solid waste it is when you accumulate all the wastes coming from all the houses. Not only houses, but from factories, but from hospitals, from schools, from offices. So when you collect them all together, it is a huge amount of solid waste. So disposal of this solid waste, that means how do we dispose them of? That is very, very important, because if we do not, for example, if you do not have a dustbin in our house, so you will keep throwing the papers here and there. So how do you think will the room look like? It will look dirty and nasty, right? So similar is the case here. So a good way to dispose your waste is to keep a dustbin which is preferably covered, so that if you put something which is rotten, for example a banana which is rotten, and you have put it into the dustbin, so it will start smelling, right? So if it is a covered dustbin, so the smell will not be that evident in the house, right? So a good method of disposing wastes inside the house is to keep dustbins at all required places. Because if we dispose wastes in an improper way, or if we do not dispose solid wastes, what would happen? It would give rise to pollution. It will cause air pollution, water pollution, and this pollution in turn will cause several diseases in different living organisms. Right? So this solid waste is also sometimes referred as garbage. So here we will talk about the different types of solid wastes, the different ways of disposing the solid wastes, what are the sources from where we actually get this solid wastes. So let us see what causes accumulation of solid wastes. From where do we get these solid wastes? Now there are various sources actually. The first is domestic wastes, maybe kitchen, sewage, unnecessary things which are of no more use to us. When I talk of kitchen, I'm talking about the vegetable wastes, maybe the food which is for example, your mother prepared food for the entire family. You came back home that day and you told that, Mom, I already had dinner outside, so I'm not going to have dinner anymore. So now what is going to happen? So some of the food will be left out, right? So those kind of leftover food items which is thrown off, or sometimes the food is kept in the refrigerator, but even then it gets rotten in a day or two, so it has to be thrown. There are some plastics which also come out of the kitchen, like the milk packets or many other things, the pulses and the rice, all these things come in packets, right? So those packets, rotten fruits, vegetables, the peel of the vegetables, skin of vegetables and fruits, so all these things come out of your kitchen. Similarly, from sewage also we have a lot of wastes from our bathrooms. We also have so many unnecessary things like unused papers and old clothes. These kind of wastes also come out of our homes. So that is the category of domestic wastes. Next is the industrial wastes. So you see, with industrialization, we have so many industries around, so many industries and factories. So what kind of wastes do you think comes out from these kind of factories? We have ashes, coal, paper, rubber waste. For example, if we talk about a paper factory, the raw materials which they use, so they send it into a machine. Now whatever is left out as a residue, that becomes a waste. So these kind of wastes are thrown out of the factories. So all such things, and they come in bulk amount, because a factory is going to produce a lot of things. So the waste is also going to be huge. So much of waste comes out from the factories as well. Then we have community waste. What do we mean by community waste? That means it is not an individual contribution, but it is a contribution of the entire community. The waste coming from hospitals or offices or shops, these are all community places. It is not an individual's house, and hospital is not a particular person's house, or it is not the waste which a particular person is creating. It is because of the entire community. So what kind of wastes do we get from hospitals? Maybe syringes, used or waste syringes, cotton, plastics. Many use and throw materials are being used in hospitals these days. So all these things come out from hospitals. Offices and shops, there again you have so many papers and used clothes and waste clothes. So all these things come out from such places. And the last is the agricultural waste. Agricultural waste would include husk, straw, fibers. All these things come under agricultural waste. So if you see, why do we need to, as I mentioned in the previous slide also, what is the need to talk about solid waste disposal? That's because this quantity is actually huge. It is not a small amount of waste. These wastes come from everywhere, from each of our houses, from our community, from the industries, from agriculture, and we cannot live without any of them. Can you live without agriculture? If we say that we want to stop the agricultural waste, so will we be able to stop agriculture? No. If there is no agriculture, what will we eat? Similarly, if there are no hospitals, no offices, so again that is a problem. So we need all these things. We need to cook food in our kitchen. So as soon as we cook food, there will be some unused things, right? So there have to be accumulation of solid wastes, because we need all these things are also necessary in our life. But what we are trying to understand is there any way by which we can at least minimize the disadvantages of solid waste disposal? Because the way we dispose the solid waste, can we do it in a better way so that it cause lesser harm to our environment? So that is our agenda here. So in order to understand that, let us see what are the types of solid wastes. Now broadly, solid wastes can be classified into two categories. So what are they? One is biodegradable wastes and the other one is non-biodegradable wastes. So these are the two categories of solid wastes. Now what is biodegradable waste? Bio means life. Degradable. Degrade means something which can be broken down. That is called degradable. So biodegradable, that means things which can be broken down. Bio means something related to life. So things that can be broken down by living organisms are called biodegradable. So if there are some waste products which can be broken down by living organisms, so they are called biodegradable wastes. On the other hand, if the waste materials cannot be broken down by any living organism, they are known as non-biodegradable wastes. So these are the two categories of solid wastes. Now we will understand each of them in detail. So here you can see picture of some examples of biodegradable wastes and some non-biodegradable wastes. So in the next slide, first let us try to understand what is biodegradable waste in more detail. Then let us look at the examples. So what are biodegradable wastes? That can be degraded to simpler and harmless form. Right? So when I have the waste products, now what are our wastes? These are either rotten things or used up things or plastic things. So things like that which are of no more use. So that means they are no more useful to us. So if we keep them just like that, what is going to happen? Some foul smell will start coming out of that. It will pollute the atmosphere. It can cause diseases, right? So it is actually becoming harmful to us. Now, if those waste materials can be degraded into simpler forms by some living organism so that they become harmless, then it is good, right? So such wastes are biodegradable. So who are those living organisms who cause these degradation? This decomposition is done by the microorganisms. So examples would be the paper waste, microorganisms like bacteria and fungi. They are famous. They fall under the category of decomposers, right? So this decomposition is done by such microorganisms. So examples would be paper wastes, cow dung, excreta, agricultural wastes, wood, etc. So these kind of wastes fall under the category of biodegradable wastes. So now you are able to understand that if the waste products are biodegradable in nature, in that case it is not very difficult to handle them. We can handle them in a nice way so that it doesn't cause any harm to the atmosphere, because when we throw such waste materials, gradually these microorganisms, because the microorganisms are also living organisms who also need food, so they are anyways present in our environment, right? So they will get food from all these waste materials, and gradually they will decompose them into simpler forms, into harmless forms, and those simpler forms in turn will again become useful to our environment. How? For example, when we throw off all these things, now suppose the microorganisms act on them, decompose them. Now when the decomposition is done, they go back into the soil. So inside the soil, they help in improving the fertility of the soil, right? So in a way it is becoming useful to the environment. So now you understand how biodegradable wastes are useful. Now let us look at the non-biodegradable wastes. These are the wastes that cannot be degraded to simpler and harmless form. That means they will remain as it is. So extremely slow or no decomposition possible. You can say that the decomposition process is so very slow that we cannot wait till that time. Because you also need to understand one more thing is that as long as those waste products are lying somewhere, it is gradually will cause some pollution to that surroundings. So now if it gets decomposed very quickly, that's fine. But if it takes time, that is also fine. But if it start taking a lot of time, so by the time it actually get decomposed, in that duration it will cause enough pollution to that environment, right? So if the decomposition is extremely slow, it is as good as no decomposition happening at all, right? So the quicker the decomposition happens, the better it is. Now in case of biodegradable wastes, if the amount of wastes is too high, then more time will be taken. But relatively, the time taken to decompose the biodegradable wastes is not that high. So here, when I talk of non-biodegradable wastes, we have examples of plastics, pesticides, DDT, industrial wastes, metallic wastes. So all these are non-biodegradable wastes. So now you get a clue from this. So don't you think that it is better not to use these kind of materials much? So the more we use biodegradable materials, the better it is, because the kind of material we use today, tomorrow those materials will become our waste. If I am using a plastic bottle today, so after a few days, that plastic bottle is going to be spoiled and I am going to throw it off. So instead of that plastic bottle, if I use some other material, if I use a paper cup instead of that, or if I use some other material, so in that case what's going to happen? I am actually making the wastes more biodegradable. In fact, these days there is a special type of plastic which is biodegradable. So you would have seen that in most of the cities these days, they say that they have started a new thing that the shops are not allowed to give you things in plastic bags. They'll always give things in paper bags. Why? Because paper is biodegradable and plastic is non-biodegradable. So the more and more plastics you collect at your home, one or the other day you are going to throw them off as well. Clear? So similarly, pesticides and chemicals like DDT, however they are used for crop improvement or improvement in the soil quality, but if they are used in, they should be used in limited amount, because when there are too many disadvantages associated with them. So we have to put a limit on their usage. Similarly, a lot of industrial wastes also fall under the category of non-biodegradable waste. So we need to put a check on using things which are non-biodegradable, because such materials remain in the environment for a very long time and therefore harms the environment. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.